how cool is that to have a game and be like, oh yeah, like this guy, yeah, he made this spell, and now that's like just a thing, to have a fictional character that you made. Literally, I mean, Melf's Minute Meteors and Melf's Acid Arrows are two of the spells that just live in my brain rent free.
Mm-hmm. And then they're official, legit.
Well, they say someone pointed out like they have it's a person's name, like a description, and then a noun. So you got Tensor's floating disc. So that means that Mike's Hard Lemonade is a D&D
the Wizard Mike.
Legendary Wizard of Mike. His brew is of legend.
I got a friend named Mike. I'll have to ask him.
Yeah.
It's you?
Just a reminder, this is a spoiler-heavy podcast. Different series that require a spoiler warning will be in the description. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Gaming Theater Podcast. Today's episode is going to be a brief look at TTRPG's modules. These little modules that come with certain TTRPGs that are out there. Now, in order to explore this category with that, I've got a couple guests on my side who are going to help me out with exploring this topic. So with that, I'll just get ourselves introduced. Once again, my name is Leo. I am the Geek Scorpio, and I'll be your host this evening. And over to my right is going to be...
I'm Dan. I am from the Of Dice and Dens podcast. We're a locally started but all over kind of podcast where we play D&D, and I also represent OD&D Presents a tabletop gaming meowathon, where we're about to do our 5th year of raising money for our local no-kill cage-free cat shelter, Simply Cats, by playing a bunch of tabletop games.
Oh, right. Great. And we've been a big supporter of Simply Cats from our Cats episode a couple years ago. With that being said, over here to his right is going to be...
Hi, my name is Dane. I go by DandDaine on the internet. There's an I in the middle of it. Figure out where. That's good branding. Thanks, parents. I have been very fortunate to be a participant in the Meowathon for, a number of years. I also raise money for Extra Life and a number of other charities. And I do so via TTRPGs and sometimes on Twitch.
All right, great. Yeah. And I've seen much itch. It's amazing. And over to their right is going to be, you know him, you love him.
Hey, y'all. I'm Brandon. I am the resident video dude for Gaming Theater Presents, and I also do voiceover and, as I said, video editing. So I'm all over the place.
Also, if we know him and love him, does he need to introduce himself?
That's a fair question.
Yes.
Like, I do know him and I do love him. So, absolutely. But, I just figured I would ask.
I'm like pizza, man. Everyone loves me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You're like 1/3 of pizza already.
Mm-hmm.
There
you are the Tomato Man.
And Leo.
You are the Tomato Man. Yeah.
Your intro, though, Dane, reminded me of that She-Hulk thing. My name's Madison with 2 N's and 1 Y, but it's not where you think.
Right. Well, it's so dumb. As a very quick aside and personal anecdote, I don't mind if you keep this in, Leo, or cut it. Do you? But everyone in my immediate family's got 5 letters in their first name. So when I was born, they didn't choose a Y, which would have made phonetic sense to keep the name Dane. I got a silent I in the middle. It's Daine. And it's okay, so Diane. It's no, but yeah.
Just tell them it's the state of Maine.
Oh, I've never used that before. I'm going to have to steal that.
There you go.
I appreciate
I just changed your world,
Yeah,
man.
you did. Dane, like Maine.
Dane like Maine.
But not from Spain.
No.
But not from Spain.
If it rains on the plane, something Spain.
If it rains on the plane, please avoid and take a train.
Yeah, there you go.
To Maine.
Oh, this is going to keep me sane. But anyway.
What a pain.
With that being said, let's take a quick trip over to the Magical Merch Booth.
Oh, God. Oh, I shouldn't have worn shorts. It burns. Oh, it burns.
All right, here we are in the Magical Merch Booth. And today, our buddy Dan is going to tell us more about the Meowathon that's happening.
So, yeah, the Meowathon is an event that we've been putting on since 2020. Back then, there were some events happening in the world that, made it difficult for Simply Cats to hold their in-person charity fundraisers. In fact, I believe they have a dinner they did every year that they had to refund the money from. So they did, Idaho Gives did kind of a special COVID event. And so, everyone, you kind of sign up. It's like a little competition, multiple people sign up for Simply Cats and you try to beat each other, right? And there's like a competition. The person who like raised the most for a charity, they got like a prize or something, I think. And my significant other, Ari, told me, she's like, we have a podcast. You've got a couple thousand followers on Twitter. Why don't you go ahead and can you send a message out and just see if we can get some people to donate to them? And I'm like, well, what if we did, something for it? Like, what if we played a game or something? And then, I was inspired because that past November, there was a person on Twitter that did a thing called Fuck Cancer Roll Dice. And he did a marathon of games. So I'm like, well, what if we do that for Simply Cats? So it went from, can you send a tweet, to 5 days to plan a weekend long event of raising money and getting, volunteers and etc. But we ended up getting Todd Stashwick to join us, good old Captain Shaw from Picard, or was it Deacon from the 12 Monkeys TV show?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, he was on there for like forever. So he drew in a bunch of people, and we ended up with $1,500, raising $1,500.
Nice.
We were the largest charity to raise money for Simply Cats. So that was pretty cool. And so, yeah, we've been doing it. Afterwards, everyone's like, that was so much fun. We should do it again. And now we do 3 days, 4 games a day. So we started with 6 games. Now we do 12 games. And now it's definitely a marathon for me. But it's an online stream. The games are hosted and played by volunteers, and people can donate to enter a raffle and also influence the games, such as I'm going to give this guy advantage, or I'm going to add an NPC, or what have you. It's a variety of systems, so it's there's almost always something for someone that they might enjoy. And yeah, all of the money that comes in goes straight to Simply Cats. We use Tiltify; they're the middleman there. Their whole thing is, we take money and donate it for charities. They sign up for it, and they link into streaming. So I don't touch a penny of it. It goes straight to Simply Cats. That's great. At www.meowrathon.com. That's MEOWRATHON.com.
Yep, and I'm going to make sure to keep a link in there in the description of this episode. So Perfect. If you want to check that out, it'll be on there so you can quickly check out some of that Meowathon that's happening. What days are the Meowathon?
Oh, yeah, good point. It's the October 18th through 20th. So it's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
All right. Yep, and so that being said, let us go back to the show.
Okay. How come I have to climb? This is... all right, here we go.
So on today's episode, what we're talking about today is modules. Now, anyone who's played a tabletop RPG, or even if you haven't, you've seen definitely a bunch of tabletop RPGs. Modules are a little different, though, because they are they're changes to a TTRPG. Think of it like this. If the TTRPG is your instruction manual, a module is a story using that instruction manual. This goes back to even the earliest days of Dungeons and Dragons for that. It was, from my research that I could find, Dungeons and Dragons 1 comes out in 1974. In 1975, an official module comes out for that, which is the earliest known module that they have for that, called the Temple of the Frog. It doesn't sound great, but think of it this way. You have all the parts and pieces that you need to get this car to go, but you have no destination of where to go. This would be your roadmap and your way instructions to get there for it. And I think that's the best way to describe what a module is. Now, so modules have always existed for that. In fact, they're basically just one-shot stories, or in some case, small campaigns, right? For modules.
Yeah, it can be anything. There are people who have made modules that are literally an entire 0 to 20 thing. So, yep, it's all depends on what they want to make.
Mhm.
Now, the most of them are plug and play,
Yeah.
adventures.
Kind of little or as big as you would like it to be.
So what does that mean by a plug-and-play
Mhm.
adventure?
So, while there are some that they exist to expand upon, say, existing adventures, official adventures, most of them are designed to be here's a town you might be walking past, and here's a story in that town. So you can literally, you might have an adventure you're going on. You might be doing, complete sandbox, but you want to just throw in this little piece of a story. It's designed to be used in any sort of campaign or adventure.
Now, modules are not specifically linked to just Dungeons and Dragons. It's just the most common one on there, right? There's
Correct,
still modules
yeah.
for other systems out there.
Every system has some sort of module, because it's what it helps with is, especially folks like me who work a 9 to 5. I don't often have the time to do what some DMs can do, and really build their own world and build their own adventures. So what a module allows you to do is have someone who's created one, and you can use that. You can tweak it, you can adjust it. Obviously how the players treat it can completely influence how it works. But it allows folks like me to be able to have a story without, being like, well, I didn't have time this week, guys. I'm sorry. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. But it still lets you play a game for itself.
Exactly.
To kind of add a little bit of historical context, just for all of you D&D nerds out there who may have been like 74, it was published in 74. 73 TSR was started, so you can trace the company back a year earlier, technically speaking. D&D, as I said previously, is not the only one. Dungeons and Dragons, for you kids not in the know, he's probably the most famous for having done modules, at least initially, right? Obviously, other game systems and other game types do modules these days, and as Dan said, it's 100% a viable way to play the game, and it can be very relieving because you don't have to come up with everything. It's really nice, kind of in that thought. So the first module that I was ever introduced to was the Keep on the Borderlands, which was technically printed first in 79 for the first edition Dungeons and Dragons. Not the first module, that would be In Search of the Unknown, which came out a year before that, for the basic set of rules. But Keep on the Borderlands is probably one of my absolute most favorite modules for Dungeons and Dragons ever. It's sort of a classic hack and slash adventure, right? You arrive at a keep, you can adopt it as a base, which who doesn't like having a base?
Oh yeah.
In your high fantasy role playing game. There's monsters everywhere. It's a huge problem. You have to go to the Caves of Chaos in order to sort of stop these monsters from rampaging the countryside. I think there's a swamp with lizard men in it. I mean, it's a really good time. So obviously not the first of modules, but my personal favorite. And I think it's kind of interesting that D&D came out in 74. 78 was the first module that I'm aware of. There may have been some before then, but that's the first one that I'm aware of, B1. And we've kind of carried that tradition on forward to the point where anymore, Wizards of the Coast is now printing official modules still to this day that you can use for Dungeons and Dragons. And, other companies have followed suit kind of in that pursuit, where if you don't have the time or the energy or even the inclination, if you don't want to make a homebrew campaign world to play in, you can open a book, read the first chapter, and then the next day run your friends through it, which I think is really a low barrier to entry, and I think is very cool.
Yeah.
In fact, it's such an interesting concept for it because after Dungeons and Dragons, almost at least there's a handful now, but most tabletop RPGs, especially new ones that are coming around, they keep a module in the back. And it's really helpful for independent TTRPGers and people who are just companies who are just starting to make TTRPGs. because what happens with that is that it gives sort of a instruction on how this should play out for itself.
Yep.
We were doing in Brandon we were doing a liminal horror with Zombie Hand previously, and they had a module that was for that to help explain all of its weird rules on that. And so like it's modules you start seeing them more often. In fact, half of the books I have for different TTRPGs have a module in it, which is kind of fun. So like the original Cortex book is actually based off of the Serenity movie and Firefly. So it's using that universe. So they have a completely separate storyline for that, and they use that as the instructions for how to play this game. It's like, oh, so if you're playing your ship it's not the one from Firefly. We're not using that one, even though it's familiar. But we're going to use this one called Aces and Eights. And it was explaining things like you could be the owner of the ship, but not the pilot. You could be the engineer, and if you need to make a roll, this is what you would roll. These stats, just like what our engineer was doing. Nice. And honestly, it's very helpful to go through that because they also do have that in Vampire the Masquerade, which helped me understand vampire and White Wolf stuff.
Yeah, I played a little bit of that in high school. We had a group of people who were running it during lunch. I played a Malkavian because that's sort of the type of characters I almost always play. Some sort of troublesome, problematic.
I was a Bruja in early college is when I first got the Vampire the Masquerade bug. And yeah, very similar troublemaker, but maybe a little bit less, or I guess more hinged, a little less, you know, not less hinged, but more hinged than a Malkavian usually.
Yeah.
I couldn't find a group to play it, but I wanted to be a Tremor. I just think that would be different for
books, Leo, if we can find time.
There's a conversion of Blades in the Dark that is Vampire the Masquerade as well. My offline group played that a little bit. It's very interesting.
Love that game.
Now, interesting enough, modules themselves, if they get popular enough, sometimes they will make changes to the rule set themselves. So some of those ones have bigger ones. I know that the modules where we end up getting, well, at least for classic Dungeons and Dragons, is where we actually get add-ons for the Githyanki, the which shows up in Baldur's Gate, which I think Baldur's Gate started as a module. I might be wrong about that.
I know it's definitely a location. I'm sure that it was also. I mean, usually when they have a location book, there's usually at least one adventure in there as well to teach you the world.
Yeah. No, Ravenloft is another place, which is, and there's bunches of back in the early 90s and such. There was a few different games that were just about Ravenloft alone for Dungeons and Dragons for video game stuff, and so they had, and I know that 2 of those video games from the early 90s, late 80s were actually just a module that was just put in there. And honestly, modules are a great way to do a transition for that. Probably the most famous module, at least the one that I personally know, is Dragonlance. Dragonlance was created so Dragonlance is a novel series, and then Red White was telling me about that. They're like, oh, he goes, oh, and by the way, it's based on Dungeons and Dragons. I go, how? What? No. Granted, I don't understand this because I was much younger, but no. So they played together, wrote everything down as a created thing, and then wrote it out as a series of modules first, and then use that as like a companion to the book series that they were coming out with as well.
If I had a nickel for every time that happened regarding like D&D or fantasy role playing in general, I mean, I think we'd at least have probably 5 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened so often. Ed Greenwood, the creator of the Forgotten Realms, he has sort of overall dominion, even though Wizards owns it. But he created it. It was his D&D game set in this world that he had been drafting for forever. He brings in R.A. Salvatore, Bob Salvatore, to do Drizzt Do'Urden, who then takes off. They include Baldur's Gate in there. But yeah, from what it sounds like, Mordenkainen was a character in Gary Gygax's home game, which is a famous wizard in Dungeons and Dragons. You've got a number of other characters that are all at one point PCs in their respective creators' game that then became NPCs in other people's games. So that's why we get Melf. Melf was a player character initially. A lot of the people who made spells, Tensor, and his floating disc. It's very fascinating to me that like, how cool is that to have a game and be like, oh yeah, like this guy, yeah, he made this spell, and now that's like just a thing, to have a fictional character that you made. Literally, I mean, Melf's Minute Meteors and Melf's Acid Arrows are two of the spells that just live in my brain rent free.
And then they're official, legit.
Well, they say someone pointed out like they have it's a person's name, like a description, and then a noun. So you got Tensor's floating disc. So that means that Mike's Hard Lemonade is a D&D
the Wizard Mike.
Legendary Wizard of Mike. His brew is of legend.
Friend named Mike. I'll have to ask him.
Yeah.
It's you?
Oh, I love that. Oh, so with that being said, though, I'm trying to find out, but this goes kind of all over the place for modules. I know in some cases, how do I want to put this? Inspiration creates a canon, and then the canon's inspiration creates a module. So let me try to explain that.
Yeah, explain that.
In a weird way. So here's the thing. Here's one. The anime buffs will know this one. So there's a old anime called Record of Lotus War. So Record of Lotus War was an anime that's based off of Dungeons and Dragons. And from what I understand, later they made a bunch of modules because of how popular Record of Lotus War was, which used the Dungeons and Dragons, which lore that's on there.
And those would then become video games too.
True. Yeah. Crossover into video games.
Well, Tamriel from the Elder Scrolls were the people who made, Elder Scrolls were huge into pen and paper. And so when they created Tamriel, they created it as if they were building a pen and paper campaign setting.
Which is why the first few Elder Scrolls were so good.
And why there's still so many books.
Yeah, true. Not to say that the more recent ones haven't been good, but they're different, right? It has a different feel to it. To use maybe a little bit less of a dated reference, I found this kind of interesting. So in Japan, the term kobolds mean a different creature than we think of them here in the West, typically. Typically we think of like lizard folk and lizard men, little small dragon-like. They hang out with dragons and they do all that sort of stuff. But in Japan, they're little dog people. And I guess I was reading a post by the creator of Dungeon Meshi, The Delicious in Dungeon, for those of you in the West. And they talk about how kobolds are furry canine-like creatures as opposed to being lizard folk-like creatures. But their overarching story and the plot progression was very much so inspired by pen and paper as well. So, it still happens today, and it would not surprise me if, there are some anime people who have not played pen and paper who have then tried pen and paper because of seeing the show, which I just think is neat.
I think it's a fun fact on that one.
Yeah. Little dogs.
Since you have modules on there's probably modules out there that make little adjustments for it, in which there's one that there's a webcomic that I used to read called Goblins. And in it was a group of goblins who got sort of fed up of being always attacked because they're rated as level 1 character monsters all the time.
You need to grind? Let's go find those goblins.
So what happens is new adventurers will always pop up, come to their village, wreck stuff, and then leave. And so then they decide, what if we were players? What if we were player characters?
What if we did that?
Yeah.
And so they started leveling up and going through these things. And Mike's sitting there going, man, actually, that sounds like a fun module to play, where you're just a bunch of goblins who are doing goblin stuff, but also you're a player character, so you have to pick your classes just like that. There's a character in there.
We did a run of a game where all of us, my players were goblins. We did a goblin. We did a couple goblin adventures.
I did a one-shot Christmas winter episode, where we were all goblins trying to steal toys from Saint Nick.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it was an absolute blast, Kind of a
Yeah.
similar idea to the whole goblins episode or thing. It sounds like, Leo.
Mhm.
There's a book by Drew Hayes called NPCs.
I love that book
Oh,
so
it's
much.
so good. I'm on the second. I'm almost finished the second one. I've recently discovered it through a recommendation of a friend. But basically, it's exactly what it sounds like. These NPCs become the main characters accidentally. And like, there's a nice, not to give too much of the plot away, but there is a nice little juxtaposition between the people in the real world playing a tabletop role-playing game
Mm-hmm.
and the events that they're going through and the stuff that's happening to them and all of their character deaths and the misfortunes that are happening, and then kind of zooming back into the game world, but in which the NPCs are the player characters. It's
Yeah.
very, very good.
And they all get classes, but it's not where you think. I love how he does, like, just how they fall into it. So
Oh,
good.
yeah.
It's such a good book. The
again,
audiobook is read pretty well too, because that's where I heard it on a
Oh.
road trip. So
I'll have to
Yeah,
check that
I-
out.
Not
Got
to
to
be
check
one of
it
those
out.
guys that shills, but I love Audible.
oh yeah, there's so many books on there, man.
Audible,
yeah.
sponsor us,
There you go.
Please.
Right?
or else.
No,
Sorry.
or else we'll shill more. Yeah.
Oh, so
sponsor.
sorry.
Yeah, there you go.
I should explain that joke. A buddy of mine who I stream with decided that this year, while we're doing a co-op stream, which is the Thursday stream that I do, that we're no longer asking for sponsors. We're now threatening to have sponsors. And that is the knee-jerk reaction that carried over into this, unfortunately. So yeah, every
At
time
this
it's like,
point,
you know,
just
Foot
say
Locker,
gaming.
sponsor us, or else, or else
Yeah.
what?
Just to let you know, Audible, we're already on you. You can listen to Gaming Theater Podcast on Audible.
Hey.
It's true, and I looked it up just to prove it to people at work.
And and OD&D also on Audible.
Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, we're on Audible, so sponsor us. We're already there.
Yeah,
already there.
yeah. Sponsor all of us, all four of us, right now.
Yeah, do it.
Hey, I
Do
mean,
it.
if you sponsor
yeah.
us, maybe we'll
Dare
do an
you.
exclusive episode for Audible
Yeah.
only. Hmm?
Do it, Audible. You won't.
Yeah,
Don't say you won't. Don't give them that.
Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong, Audible.
yeah.
You gotta
I'm
get like a
okay
little
with
bit
that.
like bittersweet. We can't give it all
Yeah,
the way up
you gotta-
front.
Yeah.
You got the good cop, bad cop thing.
Yeah.
Is
Anyway,
Ding the bad cop?
yeah.
Yeah, in this instance.
I don't think I'm a good cop on this one.
Look,
I think I'm wrong.
Okay.
Opportunist
Mediocre cop, bad cop.
you know what? Let's just say it's John Woo Cop.
Oh, can I throw doves?
No, you're not throwing doves. You're gonna do a cinematic spin, firing your guns with doves coming out of the ground, and no one knows where they were.
I mean, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that sounds
Magic
still sounds
does.
super cool.
That's pretty much what I wanted anyway.
Thanks, John Woo.
Yeah, John was incredible.
I want a John Woo module.
Go watch Hard Boiled. There are some
There are.
Actually, it is true.
that are inspired. And that's one thing that I think is really cool to kind of relate this all back to modules and not just us vamping for however long.
Hey.
Which I am definitely down for the record. But
Yeah.
I think that is very cool. I remember being in high school and having sort of we were playing whatever tabletop role playing game du jour at that time, but you would always see to use a more recent example like 5th edition anime, and it's somebody who has gone through and they've constructed a module based around anime tropes for the 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons.
Mhm.
But it's not just a D&D thing either. You see that for a lot of things. There's a game system that I play called Hero System, and in their 5th edition revised, maybe not before the first Marvel role-playing game, but
Mhm.
before the more recent one for sure.
Mhm.
And you go through and you create your powers, and it is very tongue-in-cheek where it's like you can have rage-based strength powers if you do these points, and you're like,
Mhm.
wonder who that could
Gosh,
be.
what a mystery.
Yeah. Oh my
Who
gosh.
is so angry?
Or it's like, do you want to have wealth as a power and just a bunch of gadgets? Could be something you do. Maybe a certain mammal-themed superhero. I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah. So this is something that I think since probably, I would say, 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons time frame forward, maybe 3rd edition. I'm not quite sure on this. The dates are a little fuzzy for me, truthfully. It's been a long time, but we have seen modules where they have taken things like John Woo, like anime or other things, and they have sort of shoehorned or fit them into this framework,
Mhm.
right? You know, Blades in the Dark or even Powered by the Apocalypse, there are a lot of games which are very like, hey, this is kind of like this thing. If you're looking for this property, this intellectual property, you can play this game. Your Kids on Bikes is a pretty good example.
Kids
Oh,
on
yeah.
Bikes, Monster of the Week.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Well,
Monster
I
of the Week,
mean,
so good.
I actually think it was second edition because I remember one of my brothers had a Marvel X-Men second edition D&D book set.
Mm.
And like
Yeah.
it had like character stats and everything for Phoenix and stuff all through in there.
Which is wild to me. Can you imagine
It's
fighting
really cool.
Phoenix?
And like even I mean that one's obviously official because it was D&D and Marvel sanctioned and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But you get these little modules that people make on their own, and then they start to evolve beyond that, and then they start making their own tabletop rendition of said property, official or otherwise.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
Shin Megami Tensei has an official one coming out, but for a couple years there's been a Persona-inspired one called Grimoire of Hearts or Grimoire of the
Mhm.
Heart, and
Mm.
that thing is insanely cool. I mean, they
I've
went
played
through
that.
the ringer to make something that looks super real and super official, and I'm almost offended that they went like the Atlas went elsewhere rather than just going to these folks because of the quality of this free PDF that you can get that is just an entire TTRPG system.
Would you say you never saw it coming?
Did I say I never saw it coming?
No, yeah. Would you say that? Their decision, you never saw it coming. I'm making a Persona 5 joke. Never mind. We can move on.
You know what, Dane? You making that joke, I got a different one for Persona 5 for you. For real?
I hope no one knows that we're Phantom Thieves.
Stop saying that.
Also, this is Persona 4, but I love them balls. I have to mention that.
Hell. Hey, everything is great at your Juness.
True.
The Sister Complex Kingpin of Steel.
I think at this point there's something that bumped into this and where I saw an interesting module I kind of want to check out is that there's been a lot of Kickstarters for modules now.
Very popular.
And which is kind of like which is cool because some people are going to think way out of the box and you're like, well, that just sounds ridiculous. The one I was interested in, and this isn't a plug, I just thought it was neat, is that there's a module coming out for Dungeons and Dragons set to 1980s pop culture.
That's just basically our podcast. Like,
yeah,
not wrong.
It just is.
I think there's the module. One of the modules is you play as a fighter who's trapped inside a large fortress and has to work his way out of the fortress. While there's a bunch of orcs that have held the fortress hostage, and their picture of that is a fighter stuck inside a small little cave. Yeah, you're playing. You are doing Die Hard in that one. That's Die Hard.
Nice. Yeah, we did a Christmas episode, and the module I found, it was a general like you had to fight a Yeti thing, but there was a house you could go to, and there was ice on the stairs, and the doorknob was heated, and there was some pink. It was totally, they completely recreated the McAllister house. And if the players go in there, they have to avoid all of those obstacles and traps.
That's so
it was great.
I love that.
So you can make a module for whatever. So yeah, the reason why we bring this up is because typically people think if you're going to get into TTRPGs, you've got to be you have to have a good game master who is super creative, who can create all these things together, and you're wondering where they have the time. Not always. Module is a quick, easy way to get that job done. And there's no shame in that to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. What I'm doing in our podcast is I actually, because I have a very intensive job, but I am the one willing to DM. What I do is I get the modules, but I glue them together to actually create a cohesive campaign.
Yeah.
So it started in a place, I just found a good starter one called Fog Over Blackpool. They actually changed the name. They changed it from Blackpool to something else.
Mhm.
But the reason why I picked that one is not only was it a really good, starter adventure, you get to continue to live in the town afterwards. So a base of operations.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
then the next one I did was Heist at Nimresa, which is a really short module. And by the
I've
way,
heard of that one.
I tried to get what my goal is. I was trying to figure out like what is our podcast.
Mhm.
And so I look at third party small creators.
Mhm.
I try to avoid using official modules from Wizards, partly because copyright, but also partly just I want to draw attention to things. So Heist and Rest is very short. You just go, you're trying to get a thing. But one of the things that you can kind of stumble upon is like plans, like military plans. So I decided, I tried to figure out what we were going to do next, and I decided they were robots. And then what I did next was Lost Laboratory of Qualish. They had to figure out what these things were, and someone's like, "Oh, these look like Qualish design." Now I know that's technically official, but it was created from community assets. They worked together to build it, so I felt like it kind of applied.
Mhm.
And for Extra Life, I think 1 year,
Yes,
if
it
I'm
was
not mistaken.
Extra Life.
So,
Yep.
so you were
So
supporting charity at the
I was
same
supporting
time.
a charity, so I'm like, I feel okay doing this one. And
Mhm.
so they end up, with all that, and they come back with Qualish, and then they find out like what's going on, and this battle's gonna be scary. And then they have a paladin who's lost in a town, and then we just finished doing Blipool Duel. I always have to say Rises, which is an adventure at a coast where a bunch of Kuatoa are trying to find a new god because a god Dualpool killed theirs. And let me give you a little story here. This is where modules can go off the rails, and it's fun. This is where I ended up having to use it as a framework, and that was it. So the concept of it, that it was written, was to be kind of a stealth sneak through caves mission, right? So you go there,
Mhm.
there's a paladin who was kidnapped, and so you're trying to rescue her. And so you start out in the town, and a couple of the Kuatoa show up, and this is where you're supposed to kind of learn how Kuatoa work if you don't know. And they've got a magic thing. They're not very smart, but they have strong magics, and if they believe in something enough as a god, it actually gets created. They actually create gods, but they're not. But these gods, they're very short-minded, so these gods fight each other, and then it's all a whole thing.
It's gonna boil over. It sounds like this is a problematic.
Yeah. Oh, it always does. Yes. So at the start of the adventure, you got some Kuatoa. They come in. They're looking for a god. That's how you learn about that. And then you're supposed to sneak into their cave and sneak through, and try to get to the. And there's some these characters and stuff. Well, what happened was that's always a good start to a story. What happened was
What I meant to say was
so you got these Kuatoas. They rolled really good. My players rolled really good on their knowledge check, so they already understood how they worked. And so the bard cast Silent Image and made a giant worm. And then
hang on, worm as in the dragon, or worm as in
no,
a
like
worm
as they're fish people.
They're
so
fish
he made
people.
an
Gotcha.
actual worm, and
They made a
then
food god.
yeah, and then the gnome used his what's it called, thaumaturgy, to kind of like shake, whoa, right? And then the bard used message into the head of the leader, what looked like the leader of those three, to say, "I am your god, Sean the Worm." And he rolled a nat 20, and the Kuatoa rolled a 3. So then I'm like, all of a sudden you feel your magic dissipate, but the worm is still there, because he convinced them so heavily they turned his silent image into the god Sean the Worm. And so then what the adventure turned into is, instead of let's sneak through the caves, they went through as Sean the Worm and converted all the Kuatoa to their god. And then at the end, it was a 3-way god fight. And I had to kind of reinvent the wheel for this adventure, but I was able to use the framework, but because of them, they completely changed the adventure. And I very much lean into it.
100%. I would support Sean the Worm.
I just had this horrible image of them going door to door. Like they're like, have you heard about our Lord and Savior Steve the Worm?
It's Sean
It's
the
Sean,
Worm.
you heathen.
That's
Oh, Sean the
basically
Worm, I'm
what
sorry.
happened. Yeah. They made like a statue appear of him, and like there was one point where we have a centaur, and so she got like one of those items that lets you have wings. So she was flying, and then the gnome made like a glowing light behind her, and she's like, "I am a harbinger, Sean the Worm," and all sorts of stuff like that.
I love tabletop role playing games. Oh my god, that is so good.
You.
And that's
It is
incredible,
good.
right? Like you took a module and you started out utilizing it as maybe it was intended to be, right? And because of the actions of
Mhm.
your players, you figured something out that worked for them, that helped
Yep.
their fun, kept their fun intact, which is the most
Exactly.
important part,
Mhm.
and just kind of allowed you to continue playing and running the game. And I think that's great, honestly. And that's kind of how I like to use modules, right? Like you can
Yeah.
follow it word for word, page for page.
Mhm.
Goblins attack here, then ogres, then whatever. Or sometimes you end up with a cult of Sean the Worm,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
there's
And the benefit is that I still have the map. I still have like there's some notable characters, right? Like
yeah.
all that kind of thing. So it's like I still have that at my disposal. I'm just like the overarching storyline is a little different, and I had to reinvent the final battle because it was completely different.
Yeah.
Because its plan was that you're supposed to win over. Potentially, you could try to win over Kuatoa for the paladin, who's like half god and she's kind of mentally lost, to fight the two. But now I had a 3-way fight, so I had to figure out the best way to handle that.
Even better. It does kind of remind me, my DM, I run a game myself, but I play in a game as well. And they had this sort of situation where our characters were going to a party. This is in 5th edition D&D. And we were doing a homebrew campaign, characters. It was a lot of people's first time in the game. I was one of the more experienced players. But we were invited to this dinner party, and it turned out to be an ambush by a court of vampires who turns out were working for the vampire Strahd von Zarovich of Ravenloft fame.
Side note from another module.
Yeah, from a module. That'll be important later. Remember that here in just a second. And we were basically, kidnapped. Our characters were kidnapped. We lost control, which is a contentious topic amongst tabletop role-playing game players. But the DM did ask, and we all bought in. We were happy to do it. And then we ran from level 1, Curse of Strahd, to get our characters back. In the middle of our homebrew campaign, we ran, I mean, it was a bit of a truncated version, but it was still like, it wasn't like Strahd in 24 hours. It was, still Strahd. And it was an absolute blast. We got to make these new characters. We defeated them. We rescued our old characters. And then we had kind of an interesting question, right? So like my character was a monk who initially was a protector Aasimar, who eventually fell and became kind of I don't remember, the bony winged skeletal fallen Aasimar, basically. He became a fallen angel through some events that happened in the game, and then he got kidnapped by Strahd von Zarovich. And so I was like, why is this guy wanting to adventure anymore? Like, I had no idea what his motivation to be an adventurer would be. And I was like, he's a monk. He's going to go on a quest, on an adventure. He's going to live on a mountain somewhere. And that's where that character left. Like, I because of the events of the game and using this module, I changed characters. And it was a good change for me. And I loved the narrative thought of it. The way it was handled was perfectly in line with my idea for the character. But that is one way you can use modules. And one thing that I think is kind of interesting is that, yeah, homebrew's well and good, and it's awesome, and everyone loves it, and it's a lot of work. So thank your DMs. Thank your DMs in general, but thank them, doubly if they put their heart and soul into something for you and creating something for you. But yeah, you can use modules in order to enhance your own homebrew, and vice versa too, right? Like as much as you said, Dan, using homebrew sparingly, but in key moments, made that a unique, tailored situation for your group, and that's something that they're going to remember forever.
Yeah,
and that is so. Even though the module
we
said,
still tell that story all the time.
Yeah, It's a great. I mean, why wouldn't you? It's a great story.
It
You know,
came
rather,
up.
rather than being like X, Y, and Z, is the same every time in a module, which I think is sort of the perception for some people. They can be as varied or as different as you want them to be.
Yeah.
If you are reading one and it's like, hey, you go fight giants now, and you're like, I don't really want to fight giants. I don't really want to throw giants at my players. You don't have to.
Yeah.
They could be owl bears or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or the different system.
So during the Meowathon, I have a ongoing. Didn't originally plan it to be ongoing, but everyone just has so much fun. But what we call the Beholders, which is it's a murder mystery group, right? They work for the Beholders. They go and investigate things, and they start in towns, and it's normally just a normal town. So I go, they're all tabaxi that live here, right? Just make them all cats. Why not? It doesn't hurt anything, but I can change the module to do that a little bit, and that's always a lot of fun too. And then speaking of another a story coming out of just tweaking something in a module. So I cut my teeth on 4E. I'm fairly D&D baby. I didn't really start playing D&D until we moved here to Idaho, and we needed to make friends. So and I never played D&D, and my partner was like, well, let's go find D&D people. And we still play. Well, it's sort of the ship of Theseus right now. So is it the same group? We have at least one person who was there at the start, as well as me and my partner. But after playing with that group for a little while, I was like, well, I have our friend Kimberly who helps with the Meowathon, and my partner were like, well, let's play. We don't play often enough, right? That's how D&D works. And she was always coming over to our house. So let's just play D&D. We were playing 3-4 times a week because they were just always coming over. And so I was doing the Orcus storyline, right? Starting to keep on the Shadowfell and the Seven-Pillared Hall, blah, blah, blah. And so in the Seven-Pillared Hall, there's a point where there's a bunch of gnolls. And so they were there. And there's one of the people I think you need to rescue is in there. And so they were, I think, awaiting a shipment from the slavers or something. And so our rogue decided to write a letter to tell them, or not a letter, write a pass saying, we are these people. And she rolled a nat 20 on her persuasion on that, on her deception on that.
I really hope that's just a note that says, yeah, I am.
I mean, it is gnolls. And of course, they failed their check on that when they showed up.
Mm-hmm.
But so what happened was she just loaded everyone in the back of the cart and said they were dead bodies and bringing them to feed to their hyena. And so then her disguised self, she got a really high roll. And just basically, we always tell the story about how just loaded up a bunch of people into a cart, just rolled right into the gnoll thing because she just wrote a letter that said, yep, I belong here. And that the whole cart and everything was not originally in the thing, but they're like, can we get a cart? And I'm like, well, there's stables, so I guess they probably have a cart. So they bought a cart, they did all that, and she was a changeling, so she could change herself to look like a gnoll.
Mm-hmm.
All that kind of thing. So it was a good time, and we still talk about that just because she kept rolling really high. She got that nat 20 and then just kept rolling high.
So good.
Now, I'll admit, modules is how I got into TTRPGs in general, because dumbest thing. So I could never find so I found a bunch of books that happened to all be modules for this when I was much younger. I didn't realize they were all modules. I just thought that these were weird stories that just had some weird math in it that I couldn't totally understand. And so, you know what? This setting sounds super cool and really interesting. I have no idea what this is. I'm putting you back now. This happens 4 or 5 times or such before I finally find it. And then I understand that these are part of it. And then I get my hands on somebody else let me borrow their TTRP, the Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition. And then I understood, the numbers, they make sense now. The world makes sense. And so I usually will go to, so the first game I actually GM'd, a quarter of that is from stuff I pulled out of other modules. And it's really good to go through that, at least in my opinion. And this is your different cases may vary. For my first time game mastering, it really helped for me to get some kind of establishment because I was making a homebrew, making my own story, but like I didn't understand how to start this.
Yeah.
And so it let me pull ideas from different things on there and glue it together to make it work out. People had fun with my RPs, but I always have this problem. Like after a couple of months, I am tired. I am exhausted from baking a homebrew for that. It's tiring.
Yep.
It's a lot of work.
For sure. So yeah, that's why it's like it's nice to be able to tie them together. Like I still have homebrew going on, right? And especially with like the storyline that's tying all these together. Like I've got a lot of like, there's still like skill checks and stuff they're doing before they start the adventure because now like the army's here and they're convincing them to do blah. And everyone I play with, they're very ridiculous. So the social interactions really drive them more than the combat. I mean, Kimberly is very much a hacky slashy. She loves the click clacks of the swords, but in general, even she they just cause trouble all the time with their mouths.
Mischief, I say.
And Jay is especially good at that because he plays a cowboy that doesn't know where he's from, and he's he's definitely a loudmouth. He's the bard.
I'm a cowboy that just walked into town. Where are you from? I don't remember.
He has no idea. But part of some of the homebrew that I do is usually in between the adventures. I give everyone a spotlight moment, and then give them an item or something that helps come from that. And so he's had a very brief memory of like tentacles coming out of an obelisk and grabbing him and his significant other, and then so like now he's got a little bit of that, and I've got some plans for that. As a DM, you always should. But so things like that, and it's technically a module, but it's not an adventure module. There's what's it called? Something weapon. It's a weapons module that's also I get most of my stuff from dmsguild.com. But this one, ancestral weapons is what it's called. And what it lets you do is you can grant points for them to upgrade the weapon they have. So instead of just being like, okay, well, now I've got this better broadsword or, this magical broadsword that does blah, you can actually say, okay, well, this sword basically has leveled up and now you get this ability when you use the sword or something like that. And so with Kimberly Centaur, her backstory is that her village was, you have to have this whole backstory. Her village was raided. Parents were killed. She had her father's dagger. You know how you have like that random item you start with in 5e? So hers was, this dagger. And so she decided it was her dad's dagger or something like that. And so then in one of the early adventures, she got the moon something sword. It glows like moonlight. And so
it glows in the dark.
It glows in the dark.
Moon touch, I think.
Yeah, moon touch sword. And so I let her have that be worked with the blacksmith to incorporate her father's dagger into it. And then that gave her an additional ability. And now she gets these like memories or kind of relives these experiences. And based on how her character reacts to that experience, we'll pick something from that module to add to her sword that relates to the story that we just told. So her sword now becomes very special to her and is very unique to her, as opposed to just, oh, well, I'm going to drop this sword and grab this sword.
Yeah.
So now she has story. That's 100% homebrew. I got to come up with that crap. And then, but at the same time, I'm using a module to improve the weapon. Right?
Yeah.
I didn't have to figure out how do I do this. Someone figured that part out for me, and now I can just marry that into the story.
Now, is it considered a module and different TTRPGs will do this, where they have a second, like book for themselves that adds on to the pre-existing stuff. Like, because I know Dungeons and Dragons has one a book, but it's all nothing but items. Or famously, the Monster Manual. Just here's a list of monsters.
So I think a lot of times the stuff that's made by third parties, they tend to consider modules because they're not official content.
Okay. So, like, I was wondering about that because, like, one of the coolest items. So, in Cortex, because one of the books that they have is from the Supernatural universe. So, Supernatural has this add-on book which explained a bunch of other stuff that was happening later in the show because the original Cortex books that they had for it was sort of stopped somewhere around third or fourth season. On that, and then there were a bunch of other stuff happened. So they added on a list of a bunch of other things that you have. Whether there was a note in there, because in the show, the most powerful item one of the most powerful items that exists is the pistol made by Samuel Colt. And it's a spoiler Harry podcast also that you hear about that way back in season 4, and when they've got 13 seasons, it doesn't stay long. But there's very specific rule sets for something that powerful that they have listed to explain what you can do. It's if you use it, you can kill basically anything. However, it has to like move on or get lost as part of the storyline at any given time. So they have like rule sets that are, and I know there's lists of like items and books like that, but I don't know if that's more of a companion thing to just assist you with it, or if it's actually considered as a module, or it sounds like it's considered a module if it's third party versus if it's not.
I think companion's a good word for it.
Yeah, I think module is a very kind of, I think, generally loosey-goosey term too. Like, sort of like planet used to be. There wasn't really a good definition. Just does it feel like it? Right?
Is Pluto a planet? Yes, but no, but kind of.
Well, it depends on the year.
Right.
But yeah, so like that's sort of how you sort of get through this definition of that. And yeah, some modules can get pretty interesting. I know that there was a movie. This is a little tangent, but there was a movie that was made called Dorkness Rising years and years ago. But the story of the movie was to actually was about a guy who's trying to make his own module.
Nice.
And then but in it he runs his players through the same thing, but his players keep destroying the world, and he knows he's got to write a book about it. So he's like, guys, you can't keep destroying the world. And so eventually I need that.
Sounds like a good story to me. And then figure out a way for the world to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And throughout the movie, he figures this up. Most of it is essentially he just let your players play out the scenario and see which way that they're actually going to go. And Dorkness Rising is a fun movie if you like that. But that's not entirely untrue. People can get published for their modules, and sometimes they just take a regular homebrew or something and then redo it as a book that they can publish.
Well, that's exactly, I think, what Dan was talking about, right? DM's Guild is a pretty awesome hashtag not sponsor. Though DM's Guild sponsor us or else. They are an incredible resource in that people can create these modules and just put them up for sale.
itch.io also has some.
Yeah.
The difference between, for some clarity, Dungeon Masters Guild is officially partnered with Wizards, so you can use Wizards content in your modules on DM's Guild. Whereas if you were publishing something on like itch.io, you can only use what's in the open source license. So Beholder is an official D&D creature, so you cannot create a module on itch.io that has a Beholder in it. But a lot of the other things that they provide that are the basics you can use. Goblins are open, so open
Orcs,
that kind of
elves.
thing. Yeah,
it does kind of feel funny, a little bit funny to me. So for those of you who may not know the historical context here, TSR, the people who used to own Dungeons and Dragons, who sold it to Wizards, got in trouble with the Tolkien estate over their use of Ents and Balrogs and a couple of other things. And so they changed it to Baelors and whatever else. Instead of hobbits, it's halflings.
Right.
And I do
Legally
find
distinct.
yes, but I do find
Legally
it funny
distinct, short, furry feet people.
that we can't have beholders, but we can have like eye tyrants or eye monsters or whatever.
I've been playing Hero Kids with my nephew, and they have a monster companion that just came out with, and they're called Beguilers.
Ooh, beguile! I like that.
Right? I actually kind of like that.
You could be super unoriginal like the creator of Ultima, and instead of saying hobbits, call them bobbits.
Yeah.
Nailed
True.
it. I keep talking about the eye holders, and all I'm picturing is just it's kind of like it's this technical word thing, like a beholder, but instead of actual eyes, they're just iPads.
Yeah.
Do y'all ever see Real Monsters? I'm going.
I was
Yes.
to
gonna
this, I
say.
promise you. What if it's just a sphere, but with arms that are just holding
Holding,
the
they're
eyes?
eye
Yeah,
holders.
it's the eye holder.
This
Was
is
it
very
Grum?
literal.
Grum was his name, I think, right?
Yeah, I think you're right.
The second best kind of distinct, literally distinct.
So there was a Beetlejuice cartoon out, and this is the core memory that's just stuck with me. There's one episode they have that's dedicated to them getting stuck in like a video game world, because as you do, just the thing.
Yeah.
Except Lydia, who went in there, came in there with with her own zappy gun from whatever system she was in. But the problem is, so they gave him a bunch of default weapons, but they're all pun based. So they got a laser, but that laser is just to shoot something that lays there. That's it.
It's not a laser,
That
it's a laser.
show was a trip. Just the initial conceit of it is a trip.
It was so weird to me. I had to, because I saw the movie Beetlejuice before I watched the cartoon show. Also, should not have seen the movie Beetlejuice because I was far too young to be seeing that before I watched the cartoon show.
It's the case with most media, right? We always watch it before we're supposed to.
Yeah.
Well,
Eh,
and Leo, I think you and I have talked about it in a different episode, but like I forgot everything but the highlights of that movie.
yeah.
Like I think you and I had a conversation about it not too long ago, where it's like, yeah, I remember the dancing scene, I remember getting to the underworld, I remember the worms. Like you remember like the highlights, but there's a lot of that movie where I was like, oh, what is this? What am I watching? Because I watched it recently.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you remember they went to the brothel? The what?
I'm sorry.
It's just like, it's the weird parts of those videos that gets burned in my brain, not the obvious things. Everyone else remembers Chippendales Rescue Rangers for its super cool theme song. I remember it because of that one episode that Gadget got introduced to a cult.
Oh my
That's the
God,
part that
or
stuck with me.
the Gargoyles episode with the gun.
Yeah. Oh, that thing is legit. The Gargoyles episode again. Although that my favorite one is the weird tangent one is the Gargoyles episode about reading.
True. You have to have a message.
Have you ever heard about how OJ ruined the Gargoyles?
No. Like
No.
Simpson?
Yeah. The
juice?
The juice did. So what happened was, so the first season of Gargoyles unfortunately didn't do great.
Yeah.
And so, but it did well enough to get a second season. So they decided to be
Right.
experimental with the second season. And instead of being episodic, they wrote it as an actual like story.
A major continuing storyline.
Yeah, that was actually for cartoons a very novel concept at the time.
Mhm.
It was
Oh,
very
and callbacks
brave.
too.
Yeah, very brave thing to try to do, like basically make it an entire season movie, right?
Mhm.
That's just what we're used to now, right? That's just what shows are now. But so they were doing that, like, okay, let's push this out. And they were pushing it out. They were actually doing a new episode every day. They were just basically, here you go, boom, 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 boom. Well, then the OJ trial happened, one of the first big televised things. And
Mhm.
guess what? Everyone's parents were watching during the time of Gargoyles.
No.
And because, you would have to wait weeks for repeats, and they wouldn't repeat them sometimes in order because of syndication. If you didn't follow it the first time through, you lose the story. And so people stopped watching Gargoyles because of that. And it killed the show. So O.J. Simpson destroyed Gargoyles.
What a monster.
Right?
So yeah, then if anybody's paid attention to our, I think we brought this up once in the animation episode back at the end of season 1, but it's Gargoyles intensely decided to do a what was it? Season 1 is 13 episodes long. Season 2 is 52 episodes long. So 52, that is roughly about once every week for a year, a new episode minimum. And if you missed it, done.
Done.
And they're not going, and those were storylines were all over the place.
I do kind of miss those like levels of episodes, to be honest. Like
Mhm.
this is like 12 episodes, 24 episodes, 8
I know.
episodes. Like it's just not it, y'all. You bring back the 74 episode season. Maybe not.
Next Generation had tons of episodes. this
Yeah.
season.
Well, and like, what's the Futurama joke? 43 episodes, but only 12 good ones.
Yeah.
Something like that for the original series.
That
Oh
many?
my god, I introduced that to my nephew recently. He's 9, and he has watched that series over start to finish probably 5 or 6 times in the last couple months. And now he's stoked there's new episodes coming out.
Like, oh, Futurama.
Yeah.
It's been canceled
I-
how many times?
So many.
It's got the record now. It used to be
Yeah.
held by Family Guy.
I was going to say, Family Guy got canceled between seasons twice, I think.
They're duking it out.
Futurama's up to 4, last I checked.
So
And
many.
I will say this, after about because Futurama has this as one of their movies, but they also have it as like, and I would be interested to see if they'll ever turn this into a module. But they actually have a tabletop RPG episode.
Yeah, Bender's game.
I want to see a
True.
piece of a billion backs in that,
good.
since
That
was
wouldn't make as good of
totally the
of
joke.
a module.
I mean, depends on what kind of game you're playing.
Yeah.
It also depends on what meaning you're choosing to take from Urban Dictionary, Dane.
But that's Urban Dictionary. and not,
there are some of those like what Magic Anime Girl tabletop game.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
So that might work.
Look, there's an anime where there's a zombie that turns in a zombie male that turns into a magical girl, and that's just hilarious to me.
Hmm.
Actually, nowadays you could probably throw a rock and you can hit a magical girl in an anime somewhere.
Yeah,
Don't
Probably.
go throwing rocks.
at Anime Girls.
Yeah. Or really
Everything's an
anybody,
anime
but like
girl now.
especially
Yeah,
anime
I guess,
girls.
I guess yeah. With that caveat, I have a much more specific caveat than Dane does.
Yeah. Someone's getting a rock thrown at him if you don't knock it off.
I mean, hey, some people deserve to have rocks thrown at them. I'm not gonna say it's never an okay thing to do.
And
I'm not
I
going to put
never-
myself
I-
in that.
I never said to hit them.
It's so fair. It's fair. You could be a bad shot. That's a fair point.
Just throw it at them.
We here at Gaming Theater Presents don't condone rock throwing, but do you?
At Anime Girls specifically.
Like, all I'm saying is
That's
if you throw-
OD&D.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
That's
If you throw a rock at Sailor Moon, she has the ability to erase your universe.
what
just
I'm saying. Like, don't
Like,
throw it at them.
yeah, it's not a
Look,
good
man,
choice.
In the name of the
If
moon,
you have the
she will
instinct to
punish
throw a
you.
rock, yeah. If you have the instinct to throw a rock at someone, just avoid the magic girls. okay?
Yeah, yeah. It could be any other anime
I
protagonist.
like
You're
my
probably okay.
universe.
Look,
Yeah,
Sailor Moon is the queen of the biggest rock, okay?
Fair.
That is true.
You throw one at her, she'll throw hers at you. Won't end
Mhm.
well.
Odd enough, speaking of throwing rocks, you could probably throw a rock into a game store and you'll hit a module.
Yeah.
There is so many modules now that it's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Well, and it all kind of stemmed from, the official ones, too. I mean, they would release little storybooks to help get people started.
Yeah.
And then
Mhm.
from there, people would adjust on the fly as needed. And then, boom, you got your own thing. They'll take notes. They'll keep notes. Then it's their own setup.
Yeah, because there's a bunch of them on DM's Guild that are explicitly like spins off, either like supposed to take place after, like Waterdeep, or is another story that can kind of come off of Waterdeep, but ties into the overall story that Wizards was originally telling. And Waterdeep itself is kind of it's a setting, but its adventure is a module technically.
Mhm.
Right.
What is actually part of the game, a real game anymore at this point? It's all modules all the way down until you get to the rules.
The only thing that is the game is the rules at this point. Modules don't count.
Yeah,
It's
the
like-
mod. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Because when it first came out, right, they didn't really have a thing, so you were just winging it, right?
Mhm.
When
That's
it
kind
came
of the
out in
idea.
1974 or whatever it was, Dane
Yep.
said, then you were just, let's draw a map and let's go kill some rust monsters, motherfuckers.
Yeah.
I mean,
Let's
that's
do this.
Actually, I was just gonna say that's actually why you need a dungeon master, is because all D&D is a set of rules. Without the dungeon master, there is no story. There is no map. There's no anything. So it is really just, think of it in like a game making engine. All they've done is give you the tools. You still have to make your story happen.
Yeah.
True.
So I'm sure what modules really came out of is someone like was writing down, okay, here's the thing. He's like, dude, I bet other people would like to play this.
Mhm.
And boom, module.
Yeah.
I mean, that's Ultima for you too. I mean, that's how
Yeah.
that video game came about.
I wonder if this is the same problem that other people had. I know when I was first starting to try to, like, okay, I've done Dungeons and Dragons. I want to check out Cyberpunk, and not Cyberpunk. I'm sorry. The other Shadowrun.
Mm.
It was Shadowrun, and my problem was I could find 1,000 modules. I could not find the rules. I went to the store. They had like, oh, here's a list of these things. 14 modules for first edition, which, by the way, that gets messy because their editions aren't listed as editions. They're listed as years in the Shadowrun verse.
Oh, geez.
To make it even messier. So
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't understand where where my rules are, man.
Right?
Where am I?
That's fair.
Amongst my other problems of Shadowrun, not understanding Shadowrun, I went to a swap meet and I bought the original Shadowrun book on the basis of I just need one of these because I keep finding modules. I can't find the rules to know how to play.
You getting brain burned by not finding any of the rules, bro?
Even if you had
Where
the
we're going,
rules,
we don't need rules.
would you understand them?
Great Scotch!
Shadowrun's pretty.
Shadowrun's pretty intense.
Yeah, I don't get it. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Rules. Roll your dice for your attack spell. What's my attack? That's in another book. Go get it.
Yeah, I want someone to tell me how to play Shadowrun while I'm playing Shadowrun. That's the game I want to be in. Where I'm like, here for the story, and they're like, hey, do this thing, and I'm like, you got it. Here we go.
Yeah.
That's YouTube for you. Tutorials on everything.
Yeah, but like, I don't want to watch a YouTube
Not the same.
tutorial.
Not the same.
Not the same.
I need a subject matter expert to just hold my hand the whole time, as if they didn't have enough going on running Shadowrun.
The Shadowrun is crazy, and I already did start reading through Cyberpunk. But that's also a messy, different thing. But I understood it. I got the rule book. I couldn't find the rule book for Shadowrun. You do it once. Like you go into a game store once, can't find the rule book for it. That's on you. You do it 16 times. That's the universe telling you stay away from Shadowrun.
Yo, dog, you're not ready for this. We're gonna do you a favor.
That's one of the cooler things though about Shadowrun was that it was kind of an introductory thing for a lot of people. Like there were Cyberpunk fans, not necessarily even of the tabletop game, just of the concept. And then Shadowrun is medieval mixed with the Cyberpunk mentality. So you are actually bringing two radically different sets of nerds together, and it was a very beautiful thing because now, I mean, look at the world we live in today. Everyone either everybody that is into gaming of almost any kind loves both aesthetics. They love the fantasy and high fantasy elements, or they love or not just exclusively one or the other, but it oftentimes is both. They also like the aesthetic of the dystopian cybernetic future. And I mean, we've got some amazing movies, video games, and tabletops, all because of people just trying something a little bit different and off kilter. And I'm saying that because putting elves into with a cyber brain is just kind of broken in my mind, and it will never not be. You've got your mage that can also hack your brain. I'm okay with this. Get this away from me.
Hard pass.
So there was a gal. I wish, actually, I think she said they now. She switched, but was that Diana Gaeta. She's gotten big, but she came up with the term because they talk about like Pathfinder, D&D. Shadowrun, they call them crunchy games, right? Because there's a lot of number crunching. Well, then she talked about like games like Kids on Bikes and Monster of the Week. Not a lot of math. Refer to them as creamy games.
Like
So
peanut
crunchy
butter.
and creamy, and I think that's a great dichotomy and makes most people uncomfortable when you call a game creamy.
Yeah, it does.
Big fan of
Jay. Every time
moist
I say we go
TTRPGs, you know?
I like my my TTRPG a little more drier than normal.
I was gonna say saucy, but you can't say that. That could mean something else.
I like my RPGs juicy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Could I get my TTRPG with a rosé,
And a fine
How does it
Chianti.
pair? Yeah.
a Sauvignon Blanc?
Sauvignon Blanc game.
But if you are out there looking for a TTRPG, and if you just want to try something different, try a module. Take a look at it. You can either do what some of us have done, be inspired by it to create your own stuff, glue it together to work together and adjust it to it, or just play it straight.
Yeah, you might have you might want to try something that's outside your skill set and it helps you. Like I am terrible at writing murder mysteries. I am not good at
Hard.
clues, but there are people out there that are, and their adventure was so much fun.
Yeah, and I think, a module is kind of a nice, I don't want to say easier because that feels pejorative, and I don't intend it to mean that, but like,
They're not always.
no, they're definitely not. Like I mean, not Tales from the Abyss. Oh my God, hold on.
There's a one you were telling me about with a 10-foot that you actually need a 10-foot pole to beat.
Tomb of Horrors.
That's the one.
Tomb of Horrors.
That was the second one ever released.
Oh God, that module, like, it's awesome, but it sucked.
It's the first one. Tomb of Horrors was the first one played.
Yeah.
But it was hosted by TSR people. It wasn't actually published. And then the Temple of the Frog was the first one published, and then right after they published the Temple of Horrors or the Tomb of Horrors.
Yeah, when I played through
Google.
that, a friend of mine was like, "Hey, bring extra characters. You're going to need them." And I was like,
that was the point of it. Yeah.
What? Yeah, it's just like a murder fest.
Yep.
So not all modules are created equal. That's a good thing to know.
Yep.
But also, like, don't be afraid to start with a module. It doesn't make you less of a DM. It doesn't make you a worse DM than somebody who homebrews. It's similar, I think, to the problem of like a lot of people thinking they need to do voices or do these amazing NPC characters. And like, you don't. Like, it's awesome if you can. Do it if you want to, or try it. But like, it's not necessary. In the same way that homebrewing is not strictly necessary. If you want to get a book for whatever game you want to play, and you open it up and you literally read it the night before, line for line, you take notes, and then that's what you run completely out of the book, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good way to get your toes wet, to dip a toe into the system, to dip a toe into the game, to see if you even like it, right? Because the worst thing is when you're like, I'm going to DM, I'm going to do this thing, or I'm a game master, I'm going to play this game, I'm going to run it for my friends, it's going to be incredible. And you get into the session and you're like, I hate this. I don't like doing this. And then what do? Like what happens if
you spent probably an entire week putting together your homebrew world for a game. You're like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
With it for months.
Exactly. So don't be afraid to like dip a toe into the system and buy a module and just see what it's like,
I guess at this point, I guess to end this episode, because I think we're at the good ending point. Stopping point for this. With this, if you had a module that you wanted to try, or the one that you had the most fun with, and such, I think now is a good time to see what to just list what that would be for us, so that way you have an example of it. There's, in this case, the one like I've been meaning to play, Kids on Bikes, because I haven't played that yet, but it's on my list. I have a list of TTRPs I've been needing to play. But one I've always been curious about is Ravenclaw. I keep hearing Castle Ravenloft all the time, and I'm like, I want to know what that's all about, what that one is.
So good. All of them.
Dane says it's super good.
All of them are good. Whether it's the original one, whether it's the 5th edition remake, they're all good. They're so fun. Because it's like, it's Dracula, it's Castlevania, it's just vampire guy in castle, mystery, fun time, horror, spooky time.
I'm going to go over there, I'm going to punch Dracula in the face. That's my goal.
That's Curse of Strahd.
There have been people out there that kind of did a little bit of a gender swap too, and kind of changed how it works based off of that as well.
I'm here
for a little bit, like the motivations.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, so
here
for
this.
me, that's the one I've been always intrigued with is Castle Ravenloft. All right, what about you, Dan?
I'm gonna have to say like that the Dual Poop Rising just because of the opportunity that it had provided my players.
Yeah.
Definitely had an open door that I bet even the author didn't think of.
I bet you're right.
No one saw praying to a fictional word that became real.
I know I'm gonna have to figure out how to bring him back because he ascended at the end of the thing. So
I adore this.
He joined the lower pantheon of gods in the world of D&D. So,
If what do you want to say? Oh, you know how people say that this is off the rails? We haven't even found the train; it's gone.
oh yeah, that's
Rails
what I
damned
had to
at
tell
this
them.
point.
I'm like, you completely erased the adventure as written.
Don't take this as a challenge to your game if you can do this, but if you can get your game master to take a pile of their notes and such and throw it to the side, that's an accomplishment. Now, be careful what you wish for, because I've had a game where my game master Rob has run this for me, and he's been on the show before, who ran something like that. We saw him throw the rules out. Turns out that was part of the rules. He was ready for that.
The bait and switch.
Oh, it was so bad. It got to the point that I had to play and trick another character, and he took me aside to do this, and I ended up playing a clone of myself who I had to stop because I was getting really good and almost killed the entire party as the bad villain. And this story had 10 more chapters on it.
I have a small anecdote. I was playing Hero System with some friends, and our game master had constructed this big old dragon fight. This is going to be this huge, crazy thing. And his little brother at the time, he had a character that was based around luck, and just put all of his skill points into luck and luck-based abilities. And so we get to the dragon, and first attack gets off the initiative. Their character throws a lance, throws a spear at this dragon, crits it. Okay, and Hero System's a D6 system, so like critting is a little bit weirder than just rolling a D20 and confirming it with another D20. But they crit it, and then they like confirmed the critical in some way, and did basically triple damage and just killed this thing in one hit based off of their luck stat. And I have never seen a game master so defeated. Like he just like had to like have some time where like people went out and jumped on the trampoline, they walked around a bit as he just sort of like sat there and thought about like what to do next. So yeah, definitely it's doable.
Was it in the Xanth series, wasn't the main character Bink, his power was luck?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so.
And just everything luckily happened around him.
Yeah.
That's also like what the big fight at the end for Sleeping Beauty. Hucks the sword, guaranteed hit, takes out dragon.
Kind of what happened,
Oh man. I could just picture that guy just walking around like with all sad and such. Well, that's what happened. I still got another hour to game master.
That's why you go, this isn't even my final form.
The dragon rears back up, covered in shadow and flame, or whatever. This was all part of my plan. Shut up.
Your worst part is if he rolls again. Oh, come on.
Oh, come on.
Stop.
All right. What about you, Dave?
One I would like to see come back. I want to see a 5th edition or a 5th edition 2024 version, or whatever you want to call it, of Keep on the Borderlands. I just love that module. It's just so classic, and the fact that like I don't think it's really had a re-release. It's had some reprints and stuff like that, but I would love to see how they would update it. I think it was in 4th edition, if my memory serves.
Yeah, there's a 4th edition version of it.
Which
I remember seeing that.
Because I've heard that.
Totally good and totally fine. And I know that they did I think it was like a demo of it for 5th edition before 5th edition came out. But I would just like to see it again. It's like an old friend,
Right.
where you're like, yeah, how you been, man? Good to see you. Let's go to those caves of chaos and see what happens. So that would be cool. I don't know the name of a module for this system, but I've gone on record saying that I would love to play in a Cyberpunk Red or Cyberpunk 2077 game. I have no interest in running one at all.
Oh.
I just want to play in one because I think it's neat. But I don't want to have to be the guy who's like, yeah, Arasaka, they're doing this thing. Like I don't want that responsibility right now. I can't take that.
As a game master, know which system you want to use if that, and it's important to know that you know that system because you also need to know which ones you don't want to do.
I really want to play in it. I just don't want to run a game.
Yeah, and I get that.
Let me be a player. I'm a DM enough as it is.
Right.
I did my waiting 10 long years.
So Dane, by the way, I put in the chat a link. There's a
Ooh.
DM Guild person who put together a Keep on the Borderlands conversion guide for 5e and even includes maps.
Ho ho. Love that.
So
And it supports creators.
So again, DM's Guild, modules, third party,
Sponsor us or else.
we'll hook you up.
That's another thing too, right? Like DM's Guild. This book. I'm not gonna say the crew. Oh, I don't know if this is gonna stay in. We'll say the creator just in case. Ernie Noah did the conversion that Dan just talked about. It's $4 and it's on sale right now for $3.
Exactly.
Like, that's so cheap. It's so
I don't
worth
mind
it.
giving them my money.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's some of them that are donation only, like pay what you want.
Yeah.
I've seen some of these that are like, we'll do it for $1. I just need to be $1 and just, have a good time with it, which I appreciate and I get it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people who make these modules do it mostly for the funsies or a lot of people who want to get into fantasy writing end up writing modules too.
Or sometimes they just want to share, like they wrote something for their people and they're like, I want to share this with others. My players had so much fun playing this. And then they do, and other people have fun too. Or sometimes when you have a charity event, someone writes one for you. So, because the very first Beholders one, oh shit, why am I blanking? But it was a murder mystery, and then a month before the second Meowathon, they were talking about how they felt like they wanted to write another adventure. And I was like, well, the Meowathon's coming up, maybe. So they wrote a sequel. Murder in Moss Bank.
Ooh, okay.
Was the first one I ran by Jess Wade, and then they made a sequel explicitly for the Meowathon.
Ooh.
And that is called. They've made more since then. Oh, just called it Murder in Moss Bank 2. So that was a lot of fun to play, and having someone write one for you was kind of exciting. We actually beta tested it live.
Nice. And I've been on the other side at different conventions and have beta tested other people's modules and such. Some are winners, some are not. But it's really sort of, you get to your feel on that.
Yeah, it was handy to have them on the stream, because then I had some questions and they were able to answer them for me.
All right. What about you, Tomatoman?
I want, honestly, I specifically want more that are set in like a modern time. So I actually have a lot of fun with things like liminal horror, because so much of that is based in like more modern time setups. I mean, you can use conventional weapons or the unconventional, as well as fantasy weapons, because I mean, they're really not fantasy, they're just old. I mean, you can have your thing set in a museum and then, oh look, there's a freaking sword here, I'm gonna break the glass and swing the sword at something.
Yeah, what I like about Kids on Bikes is that like you can have it take place anytime, but they the idea works really well in the 80s. We also we started one where it's like in the early 2000s, where you have like the shittiest cell phones, and then just because of that they don't have great service where they're at, because it's in like basically just west of Klamath Falls, so in the middle of freaking nowhere, Oregon.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been there, so because I live in Oregon.
Yep, ditto.
Well, could be like Dead Rising, in the middle of nowhere where there's nothing there. However, they have at least a mall, and that's about it.
And thousands upon thousands of apparently people.
Yeah, who knew that was that popular, but only one mall?
Yeah.
It's a big mall,
But it's
to
a
be
big
fair.
one.
It is a big mall. It services the whole area.
It services the Tri-County area.
Yeah, exactly.
So that being said, you at home, why don't you let us know what some of the modules that you enjoy? Just list it into the comments or share with us about it. Modules are meant to be shared anyway. That's sort of their bag. So it's not a bad idea to just share a like with that. And plus, you never know who wants to be that next guy who wants to try out that module for you.
Or if you had someone steamroll a module for you, that'd be a fun story too.
No joke.
All right. That being said, our next episode will be available on actually on the 18th, right about when the marathon would be coming up, right?
Yep. The marathon starts on the 18th.
So if you're not listening to the newest episode of GTP, I'm going to assume you're just checking out the Meowathon.
There you go.
Which is super cool, and I get that. I know I will be.
And again, I would love for you to watch and donate and also participate as well.
Ooh, that would be super fun. That being said, thank you, everybody. And thank you, Dan, for coming on to the show for us.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That being said, this is Gaming Theater Podcast, logging out. Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Gaming Theater Podcast is hosted, created, produced, and edited by Leo Garcia, the Geek Scorpio. Our music is A Drinking Game. Stock media provided by Stormwave Audio /Pond5. Our cover art is by Adam Parker. You can find him at ParkerGFX on Twitter. If you want to send us some money to help with these episodes, you can do so at patreon.com/gamingtheaterpresents. Want to send support that doesn't hit your wallet? Please leave a review with wherever you hear your podcasts and share our podcast with your friends. It really helps out. Thank you for listening.